This is a deep core workout for weeks 5 and 6 of Unlock Your Bautie. Since I'm trying to keep these sessions as short and efficient as possible, I won't be giving detailed positioning or form cues for moves we've been doing. The focus in the session will be on neck and pelvic placement and other internal and external connections to help ensure you're engaging and positioning your body properly. Sometimes doing the same move in a slightly different way can help us make connections we wouldn't have otherwise. Okay, let's get into it. Moving into child pose belly breathing. This time as we inhale our belly toward the floor, exhaling and releasing it back toward the spine, we're going to focus on our pelvis placement. This is a pose where our pelvis pretty naturally falls into a neutral position. And so I want to focus on how it feels around that area when you inhale versus exhale. As you inhale and you feel your belly letting it fall between your legs, you should also feel an expansion through your low back. And if you have low back pain from holding a lot of tension there, especially if you're a person who tends to hold your breath, this may actually feel like a little bit of a massage to the low back. And then the opposite is true on the exhale. You should feel your pelvis naturally lifting just a little bit as you exhale your core back toward your spine. Last, just bring an awareness to your pelvic floor. We don't want to be holding any tension in our pelvic floor while we're doing this type of rested breathing. Moving into tabletop diaphramatic breathing. Same thing, as we inhale our belly toward the floor and actively exhale, engaging our core in and up, we're going to focus on our pelvic placement. I'm using a mirror to help with body awareness, though you definitely do not have to do that if that's triggering for you. To get a feel for a neutral pelvic position, move between an anterior and posterior tilt, and then find that sweet spot in the middle. And I'm just focused on keeping my pelvis there as I inhale, releasing my belly toward the floor, and then exhale, engaging my core and my pelvic floor. Imagining pushing away from the floor as I exhale can also help me keep that neutral pelvic position while getting a really good contraction. Moving into tabletop pelvic tilts, we're going to focus on the pelvis's safe range of motion here. Now that we've talked a little bit more about what neutral pelvis feels like in this position, let's talk about a safe range of motion in an anterior and posterior tilt here. As you inhale and tilt your pelvis toward the ceiling, dropping your belly toward the floor, you want to stop when you feel strain or pressure in your low back. That right there, that's your range of motion. That's your stopping point. And then as you come back the other direction, moving into a posterior tilt, as you engage your core and pelvic floor and begin to bring everything in really tightly, continuing to tilt your pelvis toward the mat, you'll begin to feel that engagement throughout the front of your legs, all the way up through the front of your abdominals. As soon as you really start to feel it in the front of your abdominals, that's your stopping point. Moving into supine bent knee marches. Again, we're going to focus on pelvis safety, especially as we're inhaling our legs down. As a reminder, a neutral pelvis in this position means that we're maintaining contact from our low back all the way down through the tops of our hips, our pelvis. Pillow or something underneath can help make that easier and safer. Put your hands on your waist, and as you inhale each of your legs down, see if you notice your hips starting to want to lift off the floor, creating space between the floor and your low back. That's your range of motion, and that's where you should stop your leg, is just before you get there. As you continue to build additional core stability, you'll be able to lower your leg even further while maintaining contact between your low back and the floor. And even if you're using a pillow or a bolster, you'll feel what I mean. You'll feel when it starts to lift off of there. So we just want to make sure we're stopping before there, and then exhaling, engaging the core and pelvic floor, and bringing the leg back up. Moving into half locust pose, we're going to focus on neck safety here. One of our primary objectives with this particular move is to strengthen our posterior deep core and specifically the muscles on the back of our neck. To do this, we want to keep our neck in a relatively neutral and stable position. I like to imagine there's a little board attached from the very base of my skull to the top of my shoulders. That board prevents me from looking up and creating additional strain on my neck. Another cue is to keep the chin tucked or to keep the gaze neutral. Moving into gate pose on the right side, we're going to focus on neck safety here. Anything where we're bending and then looking up at our hand can be rough on our neck, especially if you're hypermobile, have cervical instability, etc. And so in this particular pose, looking up toward your raised hand is going to be the most challenging for the neck, whereas gazing toward the floor or keeping a more neutral neck position is going to alleviate some of that pressure. You may also prefer to look down toward the mat if you have issues with dizziness or balance. Moving into gate pose, left side. Same thing, seeing how it feels on the opposite side. This move is for the side body, and that's primarily where we want to feel it. As soon as you feel it in the neck, you're probably straining, and that's where I would recommend looking toward the floor or just changing your position so you don't feel that strain. Repeating the last 4 one more time, moving into tabletop pelvic tilts. This time we're going to focus on how it feels in our legs. I want to do a mind-body connection in terms of our intentional use of pelvic tilts. As you're inhaling into an anterior tilt, see if you can feel the stretch down the back of your thighs. Because remember, one reason we do this intentionally is to help get a greater stretch through our hamstrings and down the back of our legs. And so that's where you should feel it, not your low back. The opposite is true for the posterior tilt. We use that to get a greater stretch into the front of our legs or hip flexors. As you exhale, tucking your tailbone toward the floor, you should start to feel the front of your hips, the front of your legs working. Moving into supine bent knee marches. This time, extend your arms straight above you, sort of like you're a zombie but lying on your back on the floor. We're going to focus on shoulder placement here. As we move closer to a full version of dead bugs, I wanted to talk a little bit about what having engaged shoulders in this particular position means. Specifically, we want to make sure that we keep contact between our shoulder blades and the mat the entire time. We don't want to let them lift off of the mat. You may also find that having your arms positioned like this creates a little bit of added stability and makes this move a little bit easier. It's like leverage. Moving into half locust pose, we're going to focus on shoulder placement and what engaging the shoulders means. When we talk about engaging the shoulders, we're talking about the shoulder blades specifically, or the scapula. One thing we want to do is create space between the tops of the shoulders and the ears. We don't want to do that by engaging the upper shoulders or the neck. That's going to create strain. So the other part of this is imagine that the bottoms of your shoulder blades are sort of tethered to the bottom of your pelvis. We have muscles that are at the very base of our shoulder blades that almost act like little grippers and help pull them down where they belong. And so if you imagine engaging your shoulders from below your shoulder blades instead of above, it can help make that mind-muscle connection. Moving into gate pose on the right side, we're going to focus on pelvic safety here. Generally speaking, our pelvis should be in neutral here, and you really shouldn't feel strain in your pelvis or your groin, your inner thighs. If you do, what I would recommend is using blocks or something similar as support to bring the floor closer to you, which will reduce the amount of strain and pressure on the hips. You can also do this standing sideways using the wall as support instead. The only thing that matters is it's safe and it works for your body. Moving into gate pose left side, adding on to pelvic safety, we're going to talk about knee safety here. If putting your weight on your knee is too much pressure for it, that's no problem. You can try putting some pillows or something underneath to prop it up a little bit, add a little bit of cushion. And if that doesn't work, do the same thing as I said before, the standing option, just using the wall to help get that stretch. Or literally any other way that you can get that stretch in your side body that doesn't put pressure on your joints. That's it. You did it. I hope this was helpful. The immersive version will be released next week, so when you don't need these form cues any longer, you can still do the workout. Thanks for joining. I'll see you next time.